Well, hello and good Monday evening, world. Welcome to Who Terrorised Who Tonight. I'm your host, Phil Gurski, president of Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting in Russell, Canada. I'm glad to see so many people here tonight. Hit the volume on that one. Guys, welcome for those who are coming for the first time. Nice to see you. If you're back, nice to see you back. If it is your first time, you might want to think about subscribing to this channel and liking us on YouTube. We're here Mondays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. We talk about all things national security related and terrorism related. Tonight's a little bit different. Not going to talk a lot about terrorism tonight. We're going to talk about something a little bit different, though it has a link to national security as well. So I hope you all had a good weekend. Lovely weather here, albeit a bit cold. The sun is shining. Well, the sun was shining. It's 8 o'clock. The sun is now setting. But I'm happy to report that almost all the snow is gone. Although they are calling for a bit of snow at the end of this week, but it won't stay. So this is great. So JB, I think you're going to want to hit record now because I'm going to talk for about 5 or 6 minutes, maybe a little longer, to set up this particular part of this podcast. And the question that I want to try to answer tonight is one that's been asked for, I don't know, ever. And that question is, should Canada have its own foreign intelligence service? Now, I know that historically, some of my people on the channel have been from the United States. I think we've had some, obviously, we've had our colleagues from India here as well. And it might strike them as it's kind of silly to be asking in 2021 whether or not Canada needs a foreign intelligence service. And I think many people might say, wait, don't we have one already? And the answer is kinda. It's a very Canadian answer, actually. It's a kind of a middle of the road answer. So let me walk you through what we have now and what we might want to think about having down the line. Now, the reason why I'm weighing in on this issue, on this particular live stream tonight, is severalfold. Number one, I actually worked in foreign intelligence in Canada for the better part of 2 decades. So I got a lot of experience in the area. Secondly, most of the people, if not all of the people that I see commenting on this question in the media, like for example, in the Globe and Mail, which is Canada's reported national newspaper, couldn't spell foreign intelligence, let alone ever worked in it. It'd be kind of like saying, I've got a brain tumor. I'm going to ask my plumber to take it out. I don't think anybody would want to do that. So I'm going to push back against some of these so-called self-styled specialists, these self-styled experts on foreign intelligence, and look at what is actually feasible from a Canadian perspective. So, no, Canada does not have an agency which is devoted solely to foreign intelligence. In other words, we do not have an equivalent to the CIA in the United States. We don't have equivalent to the BSIS, or the British Secret Intelligence Service, also known as MI6. Yeah, the one that James Bond used to work for. We don't have one of those. We don't have one like the Australians do, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service, or ASIS. So it's kind of interesting that we in Canada decided not to do this. But again, let me walk you through what we do have. As I said at the outset, I did spend 17 and a half years working in foreign intelligence for an organization called Communications Security Establishment, or CSE. That is Canada's Signals Intelligence Organization. It's the equivalent in my country to the National Security Agency in the United States, GCHQ in the UK, the Australian Signals Directorate in Australia, which I knew as the Defense Signals Directorate, but they've changed their name, and the GCSB in New Zealand. Those round out the other five so-called Five Eyes partners, the Anglo-centric intelligence sharing network. So when I joined CSE in 1983, the Cold War, remember that? The Cold War was still going on, but I was hired to do something very, very different. and myself and about 12 of my colleagues. Hello, Vancouver. Nice to see you. I was hired because of my linguistic ability to actually do foreign intelligence, which means that CSE would collect, process, which in some cases involved decrypting, i.e. breaking codes. And yes, I worked as a code breaker for the better part of a year in the very late 1980s, early 1990s, and extract intelligence from signals. So signals are conversations. They could be, in those days, telexes, later on faxes, and things like that. So we had a foreign intelligence mandate. It was built right into CSE's mandate. The other mandate, of course, was monitoring the Soviet Union and its tactics and its maneuvers, because, of course, this was the Cold War. But myself and my team, we didn't do with the Soviet Union. Hey, Felix, welcome back. So I worked in foreign intelligence in a variety of languages, a variety of topics for better part of 2 decades. And I guess we should maybe, go back to first principles. What is foreign intelligence? Well, very simply, foreign intelligence is the intents or intentions and capabilities of a foreign state. And each country wants to know what other countries are doing. What are their plans for the future? What intentions do they have? That's what we mean by foreign intelligence. So CSE already has that mandate. Hello, Emil. Has had it forever, ever since its creation in 1946. By the way, just got an email today that CSE is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year. I was there for the 50th anniversary in 1996, and I've been asked to contribute some stories for the 75th anniversary this year, which just makes me feel really, really old, but that's a whole other issue. The problem is that CSE is a signals intelligence organization, which means it does not collect human intelligence or HUMINT. Now, so Canada does not have a HUMINT foreign intelligence organization, or does it? Let me read you something here from the CSIS Act, which dates from 1984, when CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, which I worked for from 2001 to 2015, was created out of the old RCMP Security Service. And Section 16 reads as follows. Subject to this section, the service may, in relation to the defense of Canada or the conduct of its international affairs, assist the Minister of National Defense or the Minister of Foreign Affairs within Canada in the collection of information or intelligence relating to the capabilities, intentions, or activities of any foreign state or group of foreign states. I.e., CSIS is authorized to collect foreign intelligence. That's right in the CSIS Act that dates back to 1984. So we do have a foreign intelligence service, right? Kind of. Which goes back to my earlier Canadian sort of waffling on the issue. You may have missed 2 words that I pronounced when I read that section of the CSIS Act, which we call Section 16. And those 2 words were within Canada. So let me make this obvious to you. CSIS is allowed to collect foreign intelligence provided that intelligence is collected within Canada, which is kind of an oxymoron, right? If you want to know about the intentions of foreign states, shouldn't you go outside of Canada to determine those intentions? No. The creators of CSIS, the great minds that founded the organization, decided, in their infinite wisdom, to limit the collection of foreign intelligence to Canada. Now, that is very different than the collection of security intelligence. So here, let me read to you what Section 12 reads in the CSIS Act, because this is to do with security intelligence. The service shall collect by investigation or otherwise, to the extent that is strictly necessary, and analyze and retain information and intelligence respecting activities that may, on reasonable grounds, be suspected of constituting threats to the security of Canada. There's no within Canada clause there. CSIS can go to the outer moons of Pluto and collect security intelligence. In fact, it does. I know they do because I've seen it. But they can't go outside of Canada to actually collect foreign intelligence. I know it's getting kind of complicated, guys, and I apologize for that. But this just goes to show that there actually is a distinction between foreign intelligence and security intelligence. And yes, the two do sometimes cross paths. There's no question about that. Now, Foreign Affairs Canada, also called External Affairs Canada, also called Global Affairs Canada, also called, the names have changed more often than I changed my hockey jersey. As you see, it's the same jersey 9 weeks in a row. Also collects foreign intelligence, but from a diplomatic perspective. They don't do it surreptitiously in the way that an intelligence service does. So where does that leave us? So by the way, if you're joining us, welcome to Who Terrorised Who Tonight. My name is Phil Gurski, president of Borealis. If it's your first time, welcome. If you've come back, welcome back. We're talking about foreign intelligence and whether Canada should have a foreign intelligence agency. So what is the solution to this problem? Well, the most economical solution would be for someone to take a big eraser to the CSIS Act and erase the words "within Canada" from Section 16. And then overnight, CSIS could go to the outer moons of Pluto to collect foreign intelligence, the intentions and capabilities of foreign states. Easy peasy. No need to create a new organization. Therefore, you'd have a signals intelligence organization in CSE and a human intelligence organization in CSIS that could collect foreign intelligence to help Canada make better decisions on foreign policy. Done. I've solved the problem. And it costs zero. See, because the other solution, which some people who know nothing about foreign intelligence have sometimes raised, is let's create a new agency. Let's create a brand new foreign intelligence agency. And I can tell you, and if you've read my most recent book, The Peaceable Kingdom, about the difficulties in creating a security service that was civilian in nature out of the RCMP way back in 1984, can you imagine the difficulties creating a brand new agency in 2021? Where would the money come from? Where would the resources come from? Where would the government priorities come from? This isn't really a problem that needs to be resolved. This is a bureaucratic change in the current wording of the CSIS Act that could be changed tomorrow. Now, the problem really lies in where would the resources come from? Because CSIS is going flat out on security intelligence matters, not just terrorism, but counter espionage and foreign interference and things like that. CSE's got its plate full on cyber attacks. You may have heard that CSE is Canada's cyber command. So it protects all government systems and it advises corporations on attacks to their indigenous, their independent computer systems. So I'm not sure how much foreign intelligence gets done at CSE anymore. It was a big thing when I was there, but I left at the end of 2000. A lot of things have changed since then. So I see all the comments sort of in here already. So Alice, see, Abshir says, by the way, I think this is your first time, Abshir. Welcome to the live stream. Hope you come back. CSIS can only collect foreign intelligence if the investigation started in Canada. Yeah, basically that's the way it works. CSIS cannot collect foreign intelligence outside of Canada. Once the borders stop, foreign intelligence stops. Now, so JB asks, it means you can only spy on a foreign state when they come here. I'm not going to answer that question because it would have me betray some really special capabilities. But nudge, nudge, wink, wink. The answer is yes. Emil raises William Stevenson, of course, the man called Intrepid, a Canadian spy from the Second World War. So he was the original Bond, according to Fleming. That's true. So Ian Fleming, when he thought of James Bond, actually thought of William Stevenson, who was a Canadian spy from the Second World War. Now, people don't know that. So Yusuf says, seems like CSIS and the Act makes it very clear the organization's intentions, perspective on foreign intelligence. Well, I think what happened is that when CSIS was created back in 1983, 84, out of the old security service, the powers that be decided we want to create a civilian security service. Oh, we're going to give it a small foreign intelligence mandate, but we're going to constrain it. In other words, they wanted to replicate the RCMP, which was a security intelligence service. The RCMP didn't do foreign intelligence, never has, never will. So they're trying to create a civilian service out of the old RCMP service with an added foreign intelligence mandate that was heavily constrained. I think that's kind of the thinking that went on. That's my understanding of it. They didn't want CSIS to have a lack of bonds. No James bonds. Bonds in general, meaning it was being tethered by what it could and could not do with respect to foreign intelligence. So So CSIS can collect foreign. Yeah, I'm sure you're absolutely right. CSIS can go anywhere in the world to collect security intelligence because threats from Canada emanate from all over the world. You don't have to. They don't emanate just from Canada. Think of when Canadian forces are deployed at Afghanistan. I had Bill Malone on my podcast about a month and a half ago, and he was with the RCMP, and he was in Afghanistan in 2010, 2011, training Afghan police on behalf of the government of Canada. Great podcast. You should listen to it about the challenges that he faced in Afghanistan. So, so within Canada was on purpose. It was not a mistake. It was fear that Canada, which is seen as the Boy Scout internationally, that if Canada had a real foreign intelligence mandate, that people would look at us and in less regard. They would see us as just another country trying to spy on other countries. The bottom line is everybody spies on everybody else. So why Canada can't do it is a great question. So Madman, the Pope, welcome back, says defund the military and concentrate on intelligence or reallocate funds to intelligence. Well, the Canadian military has been bled dry for many decades and is not what it used to be. At the end of the Second World War, Canada was the fourth largest spender on defense in the world. At the end of the Second World War. And now we are well down in terms of per capita spending. So I won't go into that, whether or not the military should be bled even further. There are reasons to keep a robust military, but some would disagree with me on that. So, okay, Aiden asks, so the CSIS Act would have to be modified, albeit in a very, very small way. How hard do you think it'd be to get everyone on the same page? Impossible. Because there are those that hate CSIS anyway, not just in government. There are people in Canada that think CSIS is the devil's spawn because of what we do and what we did. And anyone who saw CSIS getting more powers would have conniptions. They would go apeshit. And they would try to stop it anyway because they'd see a rogue CSIS going internationally to collect intelligence, not realizing it goes internationally to collect intelligence anyway. So so Soul Crusher asks, by the way, welcome back. Don't we use the Five Eyes network a lot to conduct foreign? Yeah, we do. A lot of our foreign intel, when I was at CSC, most of the collection was done by our foreign partners. There's no question about that. We had a very limited collection platform ourselves. That from a SIGINT perspective. And from a human perspective, yeah, we use the CIA a lot. And MI6, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is that, Britain's foreign intelligence requirements and the United States foreign intelligence requirements and priorities are not the same as ours. Yes, they merge a lot and they overlap a lot, but they're not the same. So you imagine the last 4 years under the Trump administration that Canada's foreign intelligence priorities were the same as the Trump administration's? I don't think so. So there's a classic case where you wanted your own independent foreign intelligence because you couldn't trust the American apparatus, depending on how much it was being influenced by the Trump administration, to collect foreign intelligence that you needed. Ergo, you need your own foreign intelligence capability. So Emil asks, are the lines between foreign intelligence and security intelligence always clear? For instance, what about counterproliferation in Iran and Pakistan? That's a really, really good point. And I, as I said to you earlier, it isn't black and white. It isn't crystal clear. Intelligence is intelligence. And it does often blur the lines between security intelligence and foreign intelligence. So you're absolutely right. The Pakistani nuclear program, which I remember very much being worked on in the 1980s before Pakistan got the bomb, I remember the reporting series, was both a foreign intelligence priority and I think by extension a security intelligence and a military intelligence priority as well. So I think, it all depends. If they are procuring material and knowledge here, we can collect. But it's about counter capabilities over there. Well, again, if it's security intelligence, we can go anywhere to collect it, right? So Soul Crusher says, we're the Boy Scouts. Yeah, we are. Canada has traditionally been seen as the unoffensive, don't ruffle any feathers, Boy Scouts of the world, which we were not historically. Again, go back to the First World War, go back to the Second World War. Canadian troops in the trenches in 1916, 1915 were the shock troops. The Germans were scared shitless when Canada came to the front because of the bravery of the Canadian soldiers. And in the Second World War, as I said, we were the fourth largest spender on defense at the Second World War. A lot of that has changed. I mean, talk about the Avro Arrow, our own supersonic jet capability of the 1950s, 1960s. That was quashed by the Diefenbaker government. Decisions were made to pull the plug. And so as a result, we don't have that program anymore. So Emil asks, so how does that work? And what happens if a foreign partner asks us to engage? We have a large diaspora community. Do we ever work with them on these issues? Yeah, we do. There's no question that, we can, again, collect foreign intelligence here in Canada. And I do remember very specifically an interview program that involved talking to members of foreign diasporas here who could help us understand what was happening back in their home countries. That is, by definition, foreign intelligence. What is the status of that program? I don't recall. And again, going back to first principles, yes, CSIS does have a foreign intelligence bent under Section 16, but security intelligence rules the roost. CSIS is primarily a security intelligence service. It's in the name, Canadian Security Intelligence Service. It's not the Canadian Security and Foreign Intelligence Service. Security will always trump foreign intelligence when it comes to CSIS. Doesn't have to be that way, but it has certainly been historically. So Aiden asks, I'm sorry, I'm sure asked, my eyes are terrible. I think Canadian policymakers want to be seen as peacemakers and be seen as in a positive light. So creating a foreign intelligence agency would make them seen as a threat. Yeah, I think that's one of the worries, is that if we announce publicly we're going to do foreign intelligence, we're kind of taking down a peg, I think, in some people's reputations, what they believe Canada to stand for. I think it's a good point that you make up, Shir, and that's part of the problem, is that Canadian politicians don't want to do that. Can you imagine the Trudeau government creating a foreign intelligence service? It's not going to happen. It didn't happen under Mulroney. It didn't happen under Harper. It didn't happen under the first Trudeau. So I don't think this is a burning question or a priority for the Canadian government, which makes me wonder why all these academics are weighing in on it as if it's like, we got to do this tomorrow. It simply is not something that's on the agenda. There are far more priorities right now. I'm not talking just COVID in 2020, 2021, but there are a lot of other priorities out there, and foreign intelligence is not going to get much of the cash or the resources, unfortunately. If you're just joining us, you are listening to Who Terrorised Who Tonight. My name is Phil Gurski, president of Borealis Risk in Canada. We're talking foreign intelligence. We're here live on Mondays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you want to subscribe to us and like us on YouTube, we'd really appreciate that. So Soul Crusher says, could a civilian intelligence organization be created for national security reasons? Well, we already have. I mean, CSIS is a civilian organization. This is why it was created out of the RCMP Security Service in 1984. Decision was made. They wanted to civilianize national security. So the RCMP still has a role to play in national security. They do the investigations that lead to arrests and charges and incarceration. CSIS has the earlier job of collecting pure intelligence when it comes to national security, and CSIS is a strictly civilian organization. In fact, when CSIS was created, the members of the RCMP Security Service, who were sworn members, police officers in the old RCMP, were given a choice. They could either they could resign their commission and become civilians with CSIS, or be reassigned within the RCMP. And many chose to stay with the security service, but were no longer police officers. They civilianized the service in 1984. So Batman says, we wish you'd pull the plug on the new fighter jet in the United States. I don't follow U.S. Military all that closely, but I do know that these things have incredible cost overruns. The military seems to get what it wants in the United States. I'm assuming that you're American, Madman. It does worry me that, so much is being spent. Although it's a dangerous world, one would argue they have to spend that kind of money. But yeah, the projects never seem to come in for what they were originally priced at, right? Oh, we're going to build you a hammer for $1. No, actually, it costs $55 to build a hammer. You hear these stories all the time in procurement. Emil asked, does a public announcement of a foreign agency really matter? With regards to COVID, the MSS basically treated the Global Security Reporting Program as foreign intelligence. Yeah, so Emil raised an interesting point. There is something called the Global Security Reporting Program, or GSRP, which came about after 9/11. And it was an attempt by Global Affairs Canada, Foreign Affairs Canada, External Affairs Canada, whatever the hell we called it at the time, to collect security intelligence abroad. It was a very controversial program. Those of us at CSIS thought it was a really, really bad idea to allow diplomats to do this for the very reason that Emil cites. They end up getting picked up as spies. They get picked up as people that foreign states can say are engaged in activities not consistent with their diplomatic status. So this is another reason why you don't want your foreign ministry as your foreign intelligence agency. They're different mandates. They operate in different spheres, and combining them is never a good idea. Yusuf says, one example to Abshir's comment I can think of is Canada's involvement in Afghanistan right after 9/11. Yeah, I had colleagues that served in Afghanistan. It wasn't just the Canadian military that went in Afghanistan. I have many good friends that served in Afghanistan collecting intelligence on security threats to Canada as they emanated from Afghanistan. JP says you can spy on anyone as long as you apologize after. Well, we're good at apologizing in Canada, right? The national anthem should be "We're sorry." I think I've told the joke before, but how do you find a Canadian on a crowded bus? You step on everybody's toes, and the first person to tell you he's sorry is a Canadian. Yeah, it's not very funny, but I think it's actually true. Yes, you're right, Musaf. I mean, Yusuf, if you're talking about Afghanistan, the mandate was promoting peace and fighting back against terrorism. You're absolutely right, but they were also there to collect intelligence on threats to Canada because Canadians join Al Qaeda and Canadians join the Taliban, and you want to know exactly who's who in the zoo and what they're actually involved with. So Emil says, don't most countries just assume embassies are spy nests and that diplomats or a number of them are under official cover? I think they do. I know that the CIA sends people abroad under diplomatic cover, which means it calls them diplomats when in actual fact they're collecting intelligence. They get away with it, but I think you're right. I think every country does it. So countries do assume that in any embassy or consulate or high commission, in the case of the British Empire, former British Empire, there's going to be one or two people there that are not actually diplomats, that they're actually there to collect intelligence. That's the assumption you make in the real world, I guess. So going back to the fighter jet, Madam says it's $1 trillion and counting. Wow, that's not good. That's not good. I'm sure says, what's the difference between military intelligence and civilian intelligence agencies? Do they more or less the same job for different purposes, or are there big differences? Great question. And this is something that I think has evolved in Canada over the years. So historically in Canada, National Defense, Department of National Defense, or DND as we called it, had an intelligence collecting function, but that function was related to the Canadian military, threats to the Canadian military when they were, posted abroad, for example, on UN peacekeeping missions, or when the Canadian military deployed to, Kuwait in 1990, or when they deployed to Afghanistan in 2001. I think the lines are a lot more blurred. I do know that we at CSIS helped the military in their intelligence capabilities after 9/11 because they've been out of the business for so long, and we've been doing it for the better part of 2 decades by that point. So Canada's a very small country when it comes to intelligence. There aren't a lot of players, there aren't a lot of resources when it comes to doing this. So everyone pretty well knows everybody else, and as a result, there's a lot of going back and forth and identifying gaps that can be filled and identifying who should fill those gaps. So I think overall it works pretty well in Canada. Certainly, it was my experience. Again, I can't speak to what's happening now because I've been out of the business since 2015. So if it's gone down the toilet in the past 6 years, A, it's not my fault because I work there, and B, I have no knowledge on it whatsoever. So Soul Crusher asks, so what kind of intelligence does military agencies collect? Do they look after foreign intelligence concerns? I don't know. They didn't used to historically, but as I said, I'm very, very careful to make it blatantly obvious that I haven't worked in intelligence since 2015. And despite the fact that I just got back my top secret clearance, I had no access to intelligence, which is I don't know who's collecting what and who's responsible for what. So I'm not exactly sure where the sharing responsibility is now as of 2020. Sorry, I wish I had a better answer for you. So Realpolitik says those are called legal agents, whereas fake identity agents are called illegal agents. Yeah, it's semantics. Again, everybody knows that we're doing it. Everyone knows they send their diplomats abroad undercover, or rather spies undercover. It's going on forever. Espionage is often called the second oldest profession, although the first one keeps getting changed, I suppose. But spying has been going on for a very, 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 very long time. Did you like working at CSEC or CSIS better, and why? Would you rather be a SIGINT worker or a human worker? This is from Abshir. What a really good question. And the answer is both simultaneously. If you ever seen my recent podcast / blog on my experience, you'll know that I spent 17 and a half years at CSE. It was a wonderful job where I was, every day at work was different. Because of my linguistic profile, I was able to work in a dozen different languages. The requirements kept changing. The intercept kept changing. It was a lot of fun. I loved my time at CSE, but all good things must come to an end. There's a song about that somewhere. And in 2001, I decided to go to CSIS just for a career change and for other reasons. It also meant I turned an hour and a half bus commute into a 30-minute walk, which was really, really great. different jobs, different mandates, different priorities, different atmospheres, different resources. I like them both. Both had their high points, mostly high points, and relatively few low points. Thankfully, the change that I made in 2001 was serendipitous because 9/11 happened. 9 months later. I didn't plan 9/11, either myself or plan for it. And so I morphed basically into a terrorism analyst. And that's just dumb luck. No 9/11, I don't become a terrorism analyst. It's as simple as that. I would have remained a Farsi linguist and an Iranian analyst the rest of my career. So you know what? Sometimes things happen for all kinds of really, really bizarre and unpredictable reasons. TB reminds me that the podcast isn't up yet, but it's coming. But there's a blog post already on that. I think on my career at CSE and CSIS. Back to the F-35. Yeah, guys, the military procurement programs I think are interesting, but they're so well beyond my purview. I don't feel like I really can make any comments on that. You're right that every state has its 2 bits that it contributes to. That's why they do it, right? Every state senator tries to get a piece of the plane or tank or ship, whatever, for his or her state, so that the money flows from state to state to state. That's certainly the way that I understood it, anyhow. I'm sure. Have I ever been stationed abroad? No, I've traveled abroad. I traveled to more than 60 countries with CSE and with CSIS, but was never stationed abroad. And the second part of your question is working intelligence more of a desk job? Yes, but it's a fascinating one because the information you're getting, you don't get from the Ottawa Citizen and you don't get from the Globe and Mail. You don't get from anywhere else. Now, it's true that 95% of the information out there is open source, especially now with the World Wide Web, but it's the 5% you're going after. And that 5% you're not going to read in your daily feed on Facebook or on WhatsApp. It's the true intelligence. It's the secret stuff that makes the difference, kind of thing. So Yusuf says, I came across a piece of the Globe Mail mentioning CBSA expelling 8 foreigners in 2020 for spying in Canada. What is your take on this? My take is that CSIS and its partners were doing their jobs. Meaning, CSIS told CBSA, we found out that persons A, persons B, and person C are, what's the diplomatic term? Engaged in activities not consistent with their assignment, which means they were spies. And it's interesting that the article didn't mention what countries, but I'm guessing, I'd bet the mortgage if I had a mortgage. Russia, China, maybe India, maybe North Korea if there's any North Koreans left. But essentially, these are people that were assigned to embassies and consulates that were caught with their hands in the cookie jar, meaning they were caught spying on Canadians, and that's why they were punted. So, anyhow. Would it be smart to have, Chris, I think it might be your first time here. Would it be smart to have Canadian spies with multiple citizenships? Yeah, this is difficult, you see, because if you're picked up in China and you're dual Chinese-Canadian citizen, and the Chinese want to charge you with whatever, like the 2 Michaels, and you have Chinese citizenship, and I've seen this happen in not just China, but in the Middle East, the government ignores the fact you're a Canadian and treats you like a Chinese citizen, which means they can do whatever the hell they want with you, regardless of what the Canadian government says. So dual citizenship has its advantages, but in some areas of the world, they don't recognize dual citizenship. They can haul your ass to jail and treat you horribly because they see you as one of theirs and not one of theirs. So it's kind of a bit of this and a bit of that. Soul Crusher says, so when intel comes in, how long would it take to develop a profile? I'm not sure what you mean by profile. I mean, intelligence is collected all the time, whether it's human or SIGINT. You're constantly trying to get the best picture possible. You want more intelligence, not less intelligence, because you have to determine reliability. You have to corroborate. The cardinal lesson of intelligence is corroborate. It's like real estate: location. In intelligence, corroboration, and you need more, not less, to actually do good intelligence, because people lie, whether it's in their signals or in their conversations. So you've got to figure out as much as possible who's telling the truth and why. What would you call the new agency? Asks Centurion Zen. That's a good question. I have no idea. I guess you'd call it the Canadian Foreign Intelligence Service. CFIS, I guess. I can't think of anything else you want to call it. Yeah, that would make sense to me. But I don't think we're not going to create one. So Emil says, what do you think of the profession university program that specializes or trains in intelligence analysis or intelligence studies? Are collectors different from analysts? University programs that try to teach you to be an analyst are only as good as those teaching the courses. I mean, there's being an analyst is one thing. Being an intelligence analyst is slightly different in the sense that your sources are often limited. It's hard to get more information. Whereas if you're doing a thesis on pigeons, you simply Google pigeons and you get all the information on pigeons out there. You can't do the same thing with intelligence. You can't Google your intelligence target, right? You can't tell the world what you're seeking and what you want information on. So it's it'd be hard. It'd really be hard to do that. Abshir asks, is it true? Oh, sorry. Are collectors different from analysts? Yes, for the most part. So when I was at CSE in 1999, I was the head of collection and data flow for the entire organization. And I had a whole host of very technical, smart people that managed collection and data flow for CSE. They were not intelligence analysts. They just knew a lot about signals and how they were propagated and how to depropagate them and how to analyze them and how to demodulate them and things like that. But they weren't intelligence analysts. There's two very, very different things. Abshir asks, is it true that news isn't really what it seems? Did working intelligence give you a different perspective on news sources? Absolutely. When you work at intelligence, you have the behind the curtain view. The view that most Canadians will never get access to. Now, again, even when I worked in intelligence, 90% of our information was open source. It was the 15 to 10% that we cared about. Now it's probably closer to 5% that is unavailable on open sources. And that's the secret stuff. That's the stuff that people don't want you to find out about. They don't want you to know what they're thinking. That was the cool stuff. And actually, in my very early days at CSE, we were forbidden from using open source information in our analysis. We were told only look at it like the intelligence, which is kind of dumb when you think about it, because the open source can help inform you, but they want us to focus on the intelligence only. I don't know whether that's still the policy. I'd be very surprised if it is, but it certainly was the case in the 1980s and early 1990s. Yusuf asks, a former member of the organization mentions Pakistan as one of the foreign spies. Oh yeah, Pakistani intelligence? Oh yeah, big time. I have no doubt that Pakistan, the Pakistani ISI, I think that's their main intelligence organization, would be sending spies to Canada. I have no doubt of that whatsoever. And they're probably spying on Indian spies here in Canada, since Pakistan and India can't stand each other. I'm guessing that would be their kind of intelligence priority. Emil, getting back to passports, Emil does say that Israelis have used Canadian passports, and that really pisses us off because it puts people in very dangerous positions whereby people now assume that because you have a Canadian passport, in theory, you could actually be an Israeli agent. And I'm pretty sure we've told the Israelis, you might want to stop doing this. Like, I know people trust Canadians. I get that. But when you use Canadian passports to hide your own people when traveling abroad to collect intelligence, you're casting doubt on all Canadians and all Canadian passports. So I'm sure there were a few. What do they call them? There's a I can't think of the term right now, a diplomatic term, where basically you call the ambassador on the carpet and you berate the shit out of them for doing things that you don't think you should be doing. There's a special term for it. I can't think of it. It's not berate the shit. That's not very diplomatese, but it's something else. Démarche. Thank you, Emil. Thank you. It's a démarche. You issue a démarche, which basically means berate the shit in diplomatic language. So if you're just joining us, what are we doing? Who Terrorised Who Tonight? My name is Phil Gurski with Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting in Russell, Canada. And tonight we're talking about foreign intelligence and whether or not Canada should have a foreign intelligence agency. We've talked an awful lot tonight about this, about the pluses and minuses. So Abshir says, I've always wanted to work in intelligence. How can I get my foot in the door in the industry? I read articles stating that CSIS has retention problems. Is it true? And do you have any idea why? How much should I say on this? I can tell you, Abshir, first of all, that CSIS is always hiring for the simple reason that, yes, people leave. People leave for all kinds of reasons. They leave for personal reasons. They leave for financial reasons. They leave for health reasons. Any good organization, whether it's CSE or CSIS or the RCP, is in constant hiring mode Because when you hire somebody, there's no guarantee they're going to stay for the above mentioned reasons. I happened to stay for 32 years with both organizations. I was told when I was involved in recruiting in the mid 1990s that as an organization, you should only count on 5 years for a person to stay with you. And I'm guessing in this age of the internet, it's probably less than that. So you're constantly recruiting, you're constantly hiring. So my advice to you is to get your foot in the doors, is put an application in. It's as simple as that. And let them know what kinds of skills you have that might be of interest to them. Often they will put out ads saying we're looking for X, Y, or Z. So when you see those things and you've got the types of skill sets, by all means, put your application in. Soul Crusher says, I met a 2-star Pakistani general at base Gagetown when I was in the military. I think he was very short. Chris, having a foreign intelligence service sounds expensive. Well, yeah, it can if you start it from scratch. But if you simply give the existing service another, change its mandate, you've already got the organization already exists. Is it going to cost money? Well, sure, it's going to cost money. But again, you're already sending people abroad to collect security intelligence. How much more complicated can it be? By the way, when you're collecting security intelligence in country X, pick up some foreign intelligence while you're at it. It's not rocket science. The skill set's the same. It's all about recruiting and running human sources. It's all about reliability of information. It's all about determining where the best, who has the best dope on X, Y, or Z. So yeah, it's going to cost some money, but not nearly as much money as starting it from scratch. Anyway, that's my opinion. Real Politics says, I think having a central agency that does both security and foreign intelligence simplifies things, prevents issues related to pride and limited sharing or non-unique intelligence. Yeah, but again, by the way, guys, there is a service that does both. There's at least one I know of, and that's in New Zealand. The New Zealand Security Intelligence Service has a foreign intelligence mandate, and it is not restricted, to the best of my knowledge, by New Zealand law in collecting foreign intelligence only in New Zealand. I don't quote me on that, but that's what I was told. Now, yeah, NZSIS is a very small organization. When I was last there, maybe a couple hundred at most, but everything in New Zealand is small. All the organizations are small. And, New Zealand has its own limited, go New Zealand. Yeah, I would like to go to New Zealand again. It was one of my favorite countries to visit. I had a lot of good friends in New Zealand. They're wonderful people. But they did things on a limited scale because they're New Zealand. But they're capable. Their SIGINT service was very good. Their security service was very good. I remember meeting with them in Wellington. So they did some good work. And I don't know how good their foreign intelligence mandate is, though. I have no idea. New Zealand has, every country has foreign intelligence priorities. What New Zealand's are, I have no idea, because it really is, the ass end of the world kind of thing, right? But I'm sure that their service does provide intelligence to decision makers. So Solkar says, do you think the PMO or Prime Minister's Office has a foreign intelligence mandate off the books? Maybe a JTF2 element? Wow. You guys are asking provocative questions tonight. Maybe, although I don't put a lot of faith in this particular Prime Minister's Office. A lot of decisions get made in the PMO as well as in the PCO, the Privy Council Office, in terms of intelligence. I know that there were some very senior intelligence officials that didn't collect intelligence, but levied requirements on us out of the Privy Council Office, and I'm guessing 2 out of the Prime Minister's Office. But yeah, I don't think I was privy to some very sensitive intelligence in Canada in the 1990s, and I mean very, very sensitive. I'm not going to even pretend to say I'm going to talk about it. I think that if there was something like that, I'm not saying I know everything, but we would have got a wind of something like that if it happened. Again, mind you, I'm a few years out now, so never say never in this business. No, JP, New Zealand is not Middle Earth. I know we're all Lord of the Rings fans here, but there is a slight difference. So, Mark. Oh, welcome, Mark. Wasn't one of the major reasons for restricting the foreign intelligence mandate of CSIS at its creation was the concern about bleeding in the functions and, more importantly, the cultures of SI and FI? I don't know. I did talk to somebody who was at the creation of CSIS. He was a young civil servant at the time. He's become a very good friend of mine. We play hockey together. He was involved in the very first talks about the creation of CSIS. There's no question that it was seen first and foremost as a security intelligence organization. That is absolutely true. And it strikes me as that Section 16 was kind of like it was getting late. It was getting to midnight. Everyone wanted to go home. They thought, let's just throw the FI mandate in, but let's restrict it to Canada so no one gets upset. So not greatly worded. It could have been worded differently. It could have been worded better. But it is what it is. And to this day, courts have been very, very strict on how CSIS does its mandate. In fact, you hear about this regularly, where courts will criticize CSIS about how it does things. They're saying it's contravening legislation, that it's doing things that are outside of its remit, outside of its jurisdiction, outside of its legal mandate. And there's this constant going back and forth where CSIS pushes the envelope and the courts push it right back, saying you can't do that. Your legislation does not permit you to do that. So, yeah, I think these are all great questions, guys. Bottom line is that at the time, the usefulness of a separate foreign intelligence service to collect human intelligence abroad on items of interest to our foreign policy was not seen as a priority. Oh, Mark, you're asking all the good questions tonight. How strict are the lines on incidental collection of FI during SI investigations abroad? I'm thinking from the questions you're asking, you got some kind of insider note, because we talked a lot about incidental collection, which means you're going to collect A and you collect B, kind of by accident, or it kind of falls in your lap. I don't know how strict the rules are then. They are now. They weren't very strict then when I was there. In other words, if you're interviewing somebody about a threat to Canada and the guy offers completely free, oh, by the way, here's a nugget of foreign intelligence, you're allowed to collect that. It's called incidental because it wasn't the primary purpose of the meeting in the first place. And you're allowed to bring it back, which kind of contravenes the CSIS Act. But you can say, hey, this is a freebie. This was not our intention. We didn't leave the country with this in mind, but it fell in our lap. So what do you want us to do with it? We could ignore it, which would be stupid because it didn't cost us anything. So yeah, we talked all the time about incidental collection. Yusuf says, do CSIS members working abroad in dangerous locations permitted to carry? I'm assuming you mean carry firearms? And the answer is, I have no idea. I think the answer is no, but I don't know for certain. The people that I used to work with abroad, the best of my knowledge, were not licensed to carry. But I can't say that definitively. Emil says, how does foreign intelligence work when things like cyber make international boundaries blurry, such as server and cloud tech, etc.? I don't think it matters, to be honest. The one thing that, of course, has changed since I worked at CSE is the explosion, not in a terrorist way, but the explosion of data that's out there and the amount of information that you have to wade through to get the nuggets. In other words, the haystacks become bigger. The haystacks were already really big when I worked there. When I worked in data flow, when I ran data flow at CSE, the expression we used to use in terms of trying to collect all this raw information to hunt it for intelligence was like drinking from a fire hose. Imagine that analogy, right? Well, now it's like drinking from, the Hoover Dam. It's just, there's so much more information out there, and you gotta troll through it to find the intelligence that meets your requirements. The requirements as leveraged by the government of the day. How they do that, I'm pretty sure AI's got a huge part of this, artificial intelligence. But beyond that, I don't know, guys. It's a different world than I used to work in, and it was enough of a challenge back then. When I left CSE, we were just starting to get into a lot of these massive data flows that were coming, where computer-to-computer communication. Remember, my career dates back to telex. You're probably thinking, what the hell is a telex? That was the primary way of communicating internationally in the 1970s, 1980s. When the fax machines came out, that was a big deal for us. We had to learn how to demodulate the signal, how to collect it, how to process it. It was hard. It didn't happen overnight. With the advent of the World Wide Web, it's a whole new ball game when it comes to volumes and it comes to processing. And I don't know how they do it. I'd love to be a fly on the wall sometimes to see, how my old colleagues in data processing and collection are managing today based on how they managed way back in 1999. So Real Politics asks, how do CSIS and CAF, so Canadian Armed Forces Intel operatives abroad, split their mandates objectives? Well, they cooperate. Like I said, we're not like the Americans where they're, we used to laugh when I was at CSE. So CSE was about 1,000 strong when I worked there. It's now around 3,000. It's grown significantly, and all after 9/11, by the way. NSA, National Security Agency, United States, was 100,000 strong. Now, a large part of those were military, but still, they were 100,000 strong, which means they were 100 times bigger than CSE. And we would go down to meetings at NSA, and I'll give you an example. I'd be in a meeting, and be 2 Canadians and 30 Americans on, I don't know, Middle East, say. And you go around the table introducing yourselves and saying what you did. And it would come to me, I say, well, I do Middle East, North Africa, Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia. And the Americans would look at you like you had 9 heads, because they say, well, I do Egypt, but I don't actually just do Egypt. I only do Cairo, but I don't really do Cairo. I do these 5 streets in Cairo, because the guy across the table does the other 5 streets in Cairo. That's how you can specialize with 100,000 people. You can't specialize with 100 people, or 1,000 people rather. And so in Canada, we're used to having limited resources, which means we have to get along. We got to play nicely in the sandbox with each other, because we don't have the luxury of wasting resources in duplication. You've got to get it right from the get-go, or else you're going to start missing things. If you're just joining us, this is Who Terrorised Who Tonight. Welcome. If it's your first time, if you're coming back, welcome back. We'd like if you could subscribe to this channel, like us on YouTube. We're here every Monday at 8 p.m., every Monday and Thursday. And tonight we're talking about foreign intelligence, which is a poorly understood concept in Canada, because those of us that worked in it don't talk about it very often. And those that never worked in it seem to want to talk about it all the time. So go figure. So Emil says, how does it work for extraterritorial warrants? Because info can be stored somewhere, i.e. in China, but originate in Canada. It says, understanding that all intrusive techniques by CSIS require warrants. That is correct. In order to intercept communications in Canada, CSIS requires a warrant. It's under Section 21 of the CSIS Act. You have to go to a court and say, my lord, or your honor, I guess they say. I should say my lord. It's kind of archaic. We need to intercept Phil Gurski's communications for the following reasons. And if the judge wasn't convinced, the judge says, go pound sand, because it's a very intrusive power that's not granted easily. So you have to demonstrate why you need it. And in terms of extraterritorial warrants, that's a whole other ballgame, right? CSIS can operate anywhere, but you think CSIS is going to collect, signals in Jordan? That ain't happening. That's not CSIS's mandate abroad. CSE, on the other hand, is not constrained by that kind of thing. It can collect signals anywhere. So maybe that's a CSE mandate. Again, I don't know. Things have changed a lot. I was certainly privy to a lot of overseas collection programs when I was there, but what the status is right now, I have no idea whatsoever. So Emil says, yeah, there's 21 warrants, are either 12 or 16. You're right. Yeah. Most of them are 12s, but there are 16 warrants as well. I used to work on Section 16 warrants at CSE. So Aaron asks, was it difficult to cover so much ground when you worked at CSIS? Yeah. Days were full, depending on your capability. So I was lucky that I could work on several tasks at the same time because of my linguistic ability, and each day was different. Now, mind you, if you only had one language and one skill set, you only worked when there was a material available in that language. And I had colleagues who were very specialized in that regard. In my case, it was hard to concentrate and to cover because there was just so much. There were so many requirements. And this is another thing, actually, I want to kind of go into very, very quickly. The Canadian government was awful at leveraging requirements. We would tell them on a yearly basis, we need your requirements. And they give us 1 million requirements. We said, we can't do 1 million requirements. We don't have enough people. You tell us you need to know about, pork chop prices in Fiji. We can't do that. We don't have the manpower to do that. And every year they come back, but we need to know about pork chop prices in Fiji. So the requirements far outstrip the resources, which meant you never had a boring day because there was always a client for something that you had collected and analyzed. If you had enough time to get around to analyzing it. The collection part's the easy part. It's the processing and the analysis that takes the time. And we didn't have any machine translation. We didn't have any automatic report writing mechanisms. It all came down to humans. And there's only 8 hours in the day. And some are more difficult than others. So you did as much as you could in the day that you had. So Abshir says, intelligence work in Canada is more broad since we have limited resources. I think so. Like I said, certainly in my time, because we were smaller, we were able to do many things at the same time. Whereas in large organizations like NSA, you kind of had one thing and you did that one thing all the time. Personally, I like the variety in my career. I sure be doing the same thing for doing the same thing for 30 years, which I knew people did. And they liked it. They're those that became very, very good at what they did. I knew some old Soviet specialists at CSC that, they were like world authorities on a certain aspect of the Soviet Union. And they were a national treasure. And they liked what they were doing. And we're lucky we had them. But in my case, it was a lot better to sorry, my nose is itchy. A lot better to have the variety. To me, variety is the spice of life, and that's something I treasure when I worked in intelligence as well. Soul Crusher asked, does the government spy on itself? Well, yeah, of course it does. Because CSIS, for example, a couple of years ago, and I referred to this, I forget where I referred to this recently. We found out that an MP was being influenced by a foreign government. So we told the government that. And the government ignored us. Says, well, you're making this stuff up. This is a famous case of an MP back in the late 2000s, I believe, who went public and said that CSIS was spying on him. Well, no shit, Sherlock, because of what you're doing. This is part of the mandate. Threats to national security, be it foreign espionage or foreign interference or terrorism, whatever. That's the mandate. Just because you're a member of parliament doesn't mean that, your communications and your intentions are opaque or not available. That's the whole point of having a CSIS, is to point out those threats. Those of us who worked on the inside, well, we had the highest clearance possible, and we had an internal security. So yes, my emails were monitored to determine if I was sharing stuff I shouldn't be sharing. It's part and parcel of working for the organization. There's no sense complaining about it. It's what happens. You hear the term insider threat all the time, right? Think Jonathan Pollard, the Israeli that spied in the United States. Think of Alder James. Think of, the list goes on and on and on and on. People that worked on the inside who were doing things they shouldn't have been doing. In some cases, in the British case in the 1950s, Kim Philby, etc., they were selling secrets to the Soviets, which was kind of our enemy back then. So of course you want to monitor the activities of your own people. You have to, because some people are tempted, or they're bribed, or they're blackmailed, etc., etc., etc. No, it wasn't Maxine Bernier, JB. That was a whole other issue. Didn't his girlfriend stuff documents down her pants or something? I forget. Or maybe I'm thinking of the other guy, Oliver North, with Fawn Hall, tucking documents down her panties or something. Abshir says, is getting top secret clearance stressful? No. I mean, stressful only if you don't like telling the organization who you are and where you've lived and who your references are and where you worked and stuff like that. The polygraph isn't fun. I've been through it far too many times than I care to remember. It's just uncomfortable. It's not, I don't know if I call it stressful. When you do the polygraph, it's preceded by a very long 3-hour oral interview where you get all your secrets out. No point trying to hide them because the polygraph is going to catch them. So is it stressful? That's really the only, I think, stressful aspect of the TS clearance is the fact that we now do polygraphs. We didn't do it when I started. I didn't take a polygraph at CSC. It wasn't until I got to CSIS they used polygraphs. Now I think they use it right across the board right now. So Realpolitik says, the thoughts on polygraph as a barometer for judging intelligence operatives' capabilities and trustworthiness. They say it works. I don't know. I'm not a polygraphist. I'm not an expert at that kind of thing. You're probably best to consult other sources on that. Obviously, they tell you it works when you're subject to it. Have people defeated the polygraph? Apparently. I don't know. It's a great question. Who says in Canada the most? I'm not sure what you mean by that. Who spies in Canada the most? I can't answer that question. That's top secret. But I'll drop you a hint. There's two you worry most about, and one starts with R and one starts with C, and it's not Rwanda and Cameroon. So I'll let you guys figure out the rest of that one. Okay, Yusuf says, was CSIS traveling to Turkey regarding the murder of Jamal Khashoggi an example of the organization's conducting foreign intelligence gathering? I have no information that was at all done. I'd be surprised. What was Canada's role in the Jamal Khashoggi killing by MBS and the Saudis? I don't think. I can't imagine a reason why CSIS would be involved in that investigation. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. What if you smoked pot in college? All you have to do is say you did. It's just simple. Now, things have changed, right? So when I got my first security clearance in 1982, smoking pot in college was a problem. Smoking pot in college in 2021 is not a problem anymore. As a result, all you got to do is say you did it. In fact, this is a true story. Okay, I'm going to show you how lily white I am. When I had my first polygraph, I said they interview you first before you get hooked up to the machine. And they said, okay, let's talk about drug use. I said, okay, great. Okay, tell us. I haven't taken any drugs. No, it's okay. We're getting it out on the table now. Just tell us about your pot experiences. And I said, I've never smoked a joint in my life. And they said, no, you don't understand. We're not judging you. It's okay to say you did it while you were at Western. I went to University of Western Ontario. I said, I repeat, I have never smoked a joint in my life. Not because I'm a prude or because I think it's wrong. I just wasn't interested. End of story. They couldn't believe that a guy born in 1960 has never had a doobie. And despite the fact my favorite band is the Doobie Brothers, it always has been and always will be. Yeah, I'm a square, thanks for that. They had a hard time understanding that I never had done that, because they want you to admit it so that when you're hooked up the polygraph, you're not going to fail the test. So that's the reason why they do that. So it's not a big deal anymore. So Emil says, so you're talking, Emil, about the video was ordered to go by Freeland. I didn't know that. I had no idea that actually happened. That's complete news to me. Why it would have gone, I have no knowledge. I have no intelligence in that regard. If you're just joining us, welcome to Who Terrorised Who Tonight. My name is Phil Gurski, president of Borealis Threat Risk Consulting in Russell, Canada. And normally we talk about national security and we talk about terrorism. Tonight we're talking foreign intelligence and whether Canada should have a foreign intelligence service. So welcome if it is your first time. Ariel, welcome back. I have friends that think that the government listens to them through their phones, electronic devices. Is there any truth to that? The joke I used to tell the people that were worried about being monitored by the Canadian government is really simple. We used to monitor you, Ariel, and you were so boring that after 10 minutes we turned you off. We thought there's no point, there's no intelligence there, there's no life there, there's no intelligent life in Ariel's brain, and as a result, we stopped listening to you. Of course, that's a joke. I'm not singling you out, on your own. The bottom line is that we don't care. We really, really don't care. Chris says, doesn't Facebook already do this? Yeah, Facebook already does it, so CSIS doesn't have to do it for you. There are requirements, and we definitely go to the people that we're worried about, whether it's terrorists or foreign spies or foreign interference. It's all to do with government requirements. So no, CSIS and CSE. First of all, CSE is prohibited from spying on Canadians. It's right in the legislation. CSIS cannot collect on Canadians. It cannot collect on Canadians. CSIS can only collect on Canadians under warrant. And I already talked about warrants, how judges don't hand out warrants like candy. Trust me, getting a warrant is a very difficult process in Canada. You have to prove to the nth degree why you need a very, very intrusive power. And judges throw out many more warrants than they approve. So no, all Canadians are not spied on. Curious, would a below average credit score be an issue for the secret clearance, even though a perfect and valid explanation is provided? I don't know. Again, it's all about admitting, that you've got issues with your finance, with your credit score. What they're trying to figure out is, are you liable to possible blackmail? So if country A finds out that, let's say, Yusuf, you owe $100,000 in loans you can't pay back, and says, hey, Yusuf, I can make your loans disappear tomorrow, but you got to pony up in order for me to do that for you. And certainly financial difficulties, as long as what we used to call honey traps, right? Honey pots, which were sexual traps that were used a lot in the 50s and 60s by the Soviets. They're trying to find weaknesses. So as long as you admit to having financial problems, I don't think that's a problem. That's just my 2 cents. Soul Crusher, how many active terrorists are living in Canada? Well, if you buy this book, you'll find out. My latest book, The Peaceable Kingdom. How many are active in Canada? Great question. Probably, I don't know. Maybe at most a couple dozen. based on my experience at CSIS. But then again, I left in 2015, so I'm not up to speed on exactly what the numbers are. But there aren't nearly as many people as you might think. Aaron, Ear Walsh asks, have you ever personally encountered criticism from Canadian citizens on what CSIS or CSC? Hang on a second. I have my glass on here. On what? Yeah, all the time. There are people who hate the initials CSE and CSIS. They think that we are the devil's spawn. They think that we are the worst thing ever invented and that we're all actually Satanists and we should be banned tomorrow. We ignore them because we know what we're doing and why we're doing it. But yeah, some Canadians have a very poor opinion of these organizations. Okay, I'll let Emil and Yusuf figure out this thing about the couch. I'm not going to go down that pathway. So intelligence services would search for social media and online activity, right? Well, they can. If you're talking about the security clearance, yeah, you basically you authorize that they can have a look at what you're doing. But otherwise, it requires a warrant. And they can only look at your open Facebook page, to the best of my knowledge. They can't go in any further than that. So Chris says, do you know how many foreign spies are in Canada? Well, 8 less. We punted 8 of them. So there's 8 less than what the number was. I mean, that's an impossible question to answer, Chris, because it's constantly changing. Yeah, I think it's an impossible number to know. I mean, CSIS might know the number based on their investigations, but they also only know what they know, right? I'm sure there are those that are really, really good at what they do and aren't crossing the radar anytime soon. So Mark asks, there's been a lot of criticism, mainly from academics that study Canadian intelligence, that our political and policy-making cultures do not properly value, understand the uses of intel. Do you agree? 100%. Didn't take an academic to tell me that. I've known for 30 years that there's a very poor intelligence culture in Canada. We go to officials all the time and say, here's what we got. And they say, whatever. When we talked about I talked about terrorism in Canada in the early 2000s. And we got, we don't care. It's not important. Director Vigneault just recently gave a speech. CSIS directors never give a speech. And he told them, Canada, China's doing this. And what was the Trudeau government's response? They're a too important trade partner for us. We're not going to go back against them. So yeah, Canada is out of the Five Eyes. Canada has by far the worst intelligence culture, by far. It's immature, it's not well thought out, and intelligence is not appreciated. Is it getting better? I've been gone for 6 years. I can't tell. Maybe, maybe not. Okay, Yusuf, you have a friend with this problem. That's okay. Ariel asks, do you know if civilian surveillance is any different than in the United States? I have no idea. Yeah, I've got no insight into how the Americans do what they do. So JB says, everyone's Satanist these days. As long as you stay clear of pizza places, you should be okay. I'll write that one down. Abshir says, I feel sad about the way the public treats intelligence and law enforcement. Even if they stop a threat, they're criticized, and even if they miss a threat, they're horrible. As you say, Abshir, the saying in intelligence and law enforcement is you're only as good as your last failure. Nobody cares when you get it right. Nobody. In fact, they criticize you for getting it right. Go back to the Toronto 18 in 05, 06, a case I worked on when we arrested 18 people on June 2nd, 2006. We were criticized for being overbearing. We were criticized for thinking that a bunch of idiots in Toronto could blow up things. And yet when you don't get it, like Zahaf Bibo in October 2014, or Couture Rouleau 2 days earlier in Montreal, or Alexandre Bissonnette in Quebec City in January 2017, if you don't get it, then you're wrong. What are you guys doing all day? You sitting on your hands? Why didn't you stop these guys? Why didn't you find out about them? So yeah, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But you recognize that when you work in intelligence, you go to work every day with one thing in mind, one thing only, and that's to do the best job you can. Whether it's foreign interference, foreign intelligence, foreign espionage, counterterrorism, it doesn't matter. You do what you can to keep the country safe. So Aaron asks, how were we able to deal with the Guzenko affair without a foreign intelligence service? Well, we had the RCMP security, a version of the RCMP security service back then. It wasn't called that. It got called the RCMP security service. It's in my book here somewhere. I think it was 73. Anyhow, read that. You have a copy, Aaron. We did have intelligence service at the time who were dealing with foreign espionage in Canada. And in fact, as I've said many times, so for those that don't know about Igor Guzenko, he was a cipher clerk at the Soviet embassy in Ottawa in 1945, just after the war ended. Like literally the VJ Day, Victory in Japan Day, had been signed, and Guzenko defected to an Ottawa, I think it was the Ottawa Herald back then, it wasn't the Ottawa Citizen, saying that he had proof that Soviets were spying on Canada, and he was ignored. And the Soviets found out he defected and tried to find him and his family and barely missed him. And eventually they believed what he said. And the Guzenko affair, as it's called, was the launch of the Cold War. It started right here in Ottawa, just north of where I am now. So you go figure. What else we got here? I'm sure, even if that's the case, I love to work a career. Yeah, intelligence is a great career, guys. There's no question about it. I loved every minute of my 32 and a half years in intelligence. I even worked for 6 months for intelligence for the Ontario Provincial Police, the anti-terrorism section. And I would highly recommend a career in intelligence. It is an amazing thing. I agree, I'm sure. Guzenko affair is quite fascinating. And it really, I think it opened a lot of people's eyes, because people thought the Soviets were Joe Stalin was our friend. Uncle Joe was our friend in the Second World War. And it turned out the Soviets were spying on us the entire time. And it was a real kick in the you-know-wheres, I think, for the Western world when they learned that. It was actually really quite fascinating. Yusuf says, I wonder if a former CSIS director decided to run for prime minister one day, it would make the lives of CSIS or CSE any easier. Yeah, I think it would, because he'd understand it. But I think the chances of that happening are 1 in a bazillion. I think a lot of Canadians, for reasons I've already cited, would mistrust somebody who worked for CSE or CSIS as prime minister. They'd be afraid he was still a spy. They'd be afraid he's still collecting information on Canadians. A lot of Canadians still think that, CSIS and CSE spy on Canadians without any merit, without any rationale, without any legitimacy. Can you imagine a prime minister that used to be a spy? It ain't going to happen. Not in this country. Based on my answer, Mark says, is there more than the services themselves can do to improve the culture of the political and bureaucratic institutions that direct them they better use intel? We do what we can. We provide the intelligence, we wrap it up, we put a bow on it. I remember we used to have what we used to call customer relations officers, or CROs. We call them crows. And they'd be there night and day providing intelligence to clients. They went bent over backwards to provide intelligence, and sometimes it just didn't matter. Some clients were great. Not all clients were duds. There are some very, very good clients that got it. They appreciated the usefulness of intelligence, and they were great. But a lot of them just couldn't be bothered. And it's a culture thing, I think. Should the Canadian government have an awareness program that would educate politicians on the importance of intelligence? Yeah, I think they should. I don't know that such a program has ever existed. Now, you would indoctrinate people. You would explain to them why you're bringing this intelligence, but is it more? It's just like, signing a paper saying you won't disclose it. Do we actually teach them what it means? Do we teach them the value of it? I don't know. We could do a lot better job, certainly, in that regard. So Centurion says, do tasers have much to do with CT? I don't understand the question. Tasers. I'm not sure. Ariel asks, if you had to pick any other career, what would you have chosen? Wow. Let me level with you, Ariel. When I graduated with a master's degree in Spanish from the University of Western Ontario, which apparently now calls itself Western University, whatever, in 1983, I had 3 choices. Go on to do a PhD. I had 4 choices. Go on to do a PhD, sell life insurance for London Life, which is the big company where I was from, go on welfare, or join CSE. So that was CSE was by far the star choice in that matter. It's a great question, because looking back, I'm not sure what would have happened had CSE not hired me. I really have no idea where I would have ended up. I'm lucky I did. I consider myself one of the more fortunate Canadians that have spent 32 years in the business, and I was just in the right place at the right time. And it's just really, really fortunate. So, you ask a fascinating counterfactual question to which I don't have any answer. The decisions you make in life lead to other decisions, right? I mean, my decision to join CSE meant I had to leave my hometown, which was really hard at the time. I was the only one in my family not to live in London. I was the only one to leave. And that wasn't easy back then, right? Had I not moved to Ottawa, I wouldn't have met my wife. I mean, the list goes on and on and on, right? Decisions beget decisions. So it's a great question that I don't have any answer to. Emil says, what was more important case regarding Canada's SI contribution to post 9/11 world, the Toronto 18 or the Jabara case? Which was more valuable by partners? For those not familiar with the Jabara case, where is it? Hang on a second. Where do I have it? Oh, hang on a second. This is a book by Stuart Bell, used to be with the National Post, now with Global News, called The Martyr's Oath. It's his book on the Jabara brothers, who were two brothers from St. Catharines, Ontario, the Niagara Peninsula, who joined Al-Qaeda in the late 1990s. The question isn't really fair, I think, Emil, in the sense that the Toronto 18 was our first real big homegrown terrorist threat. And I worked on it right from the very beginning in the summer of 2005 before it culminated in the arrests in June 2006. It's kind of like apples and oranges. We really kind of sharpened our teeth on the Toronto 18, whereas, the Jabara case was it happened elsewhere. I mean, one Jabara was picked up in Singapore, the other Jabara brothers picked up in Oman, of all places. So I think it's a hard question to answer. I think they are different things. I think we learned from both of them. But there's no question that the Toronto 18, from my perspective, was an extremely, extremely important case for us in learning how to do counterterrorism in Canada. It happened not even 4 years after 9/11, and it made the careers of two very good friends of mine who were the major source handlers in the case in Toronto. They were young investigators at the time, and they blossomed because of the Toronto 18. And it was a really, really important case. Yeah, I know, Centurion, that CT means counterterrorism, but I don't understand the question about tasers. I have no idea. I wouldn't know a taser if it hit me in the head or zapped me in the ass, kind of thing. So Shaheen says, welcome, Shaheen. How does civilian intelligence, CSIS, compare to military intelligence? Like, so you're just joining us. We actually talked about this earlier on. There is obviously a military intelligence mandate, and because the intelligence community in Canada is so small, everyone plays nice in the sandbox because we have to. We don't have unlimited resources. We don't have the luxury of duplicating efforts or triplicating efforts, and so all the organizations basically get together regularly because they can. They're all based in Ottawa to figure out who's doing what, so that we're not all doing the same thing, so that we parcel out the tasks and the requirements appropriately. Soul Crusher says, does a good trade partner really negate all the crimes the CCP commit worldwide, like IP theft? No, of course not. I mean, China's not our friend. Can we please stop saying that? Can the Trudeau government please figure this out, that China's not our friend? China's never been our friend. And yes, they're an important trade partner. I get that. And yes, if we were to, leverage sanctions on tomorrow, a lot of Canadian companies would hurt because China is their biggest market, like canola, like softwood lumber, et cetera, et cetera. But on the other hand, we've also outsourced a lot of our economy to China. Look, I'm not an economist, guys. I'm not a trade specialist. But every time you look around and everything is being made in China, which when I was growing up was not made in China, it was a joke to be made in China when I was growing up. A lot of our indigenous industries have become outsourced to China. So if we were to tell the Chinese to piss off tomorrow because of what they're doing, not just in East Turkestan against the Uyghurs and in Tibet against the Tibetans, but spying on Canadians, we told them to go pound sand tomorrow, we would open up opportunities for Canadians. It's as simple as that. And I'm not advocating walls. I'm not advocating, that we all sort of don't trade with each other anymore. But China doesn't play by the rules. It's as simple as that. Let's stop pretending that they do. And let's stop pretending that our economic interests are so important that they can't be fixed by getting rid of China as a partner. I don't see how this is even a question, to be honest, in 2021, knowing what we do, knowing what China does. Hey, Chris, can you travel while being a member of CSIS? I have a feeling that you can't just take a vacation to Cuba for fun. Interesting question. You would ask that question. So when I started at CSE in the 1980s, there was a list of countries you could not visit. Now, what couldn't I visit in 1983? The Soviet Union, the Warsaw Pact, so Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary. Mongolia was on that list for some bizarre reason. And of course, Cuba. And I didn't get to Cuba until went on vacation about 6 or 7 years ago. I'm not sure it was after my retirement or before. Anyhow, Cuba has been off the list for a very long time for Canada. It's probably still on the list for the Americans, but it's not. It hasn't been on the list for Canada for a very, very long time. I do recall, though, that I did go to Nicaragua in 1986 for personal reasons, and had to get approval for that because Nicaragua was seen as a client of Cuba. Wasn't on the list, but they said, "Oh, this one's kind of dicey." So yeah, you might not want to go there. I went anyway, but they definitely the lists have definitely I think changed over the years. I'm not sure what the list is right now. Shaheen, welcome. In your opinion, experience, which country has the most intelligence, assets, power? United States by far. Probably followed closely by the Chinese. Chinese got a serious espionage and intelligence network because they got 1.3 billion people. It's as simple as that. And they don't have to go through democratic processes to staff them. If the Chinese security service wants 20,000 people tomorrow, it gets 20,000 people tomorrow. It doesn't have to go through Congress or the Senate or Parliament, because that's the way the Chinese system works. Soul Crusher, would you visit Russia? No, I have visited Russia. I went to Russia in 2007 because this was after the fall of the wall, and Russia was part of the then G8, which is now back to the G7. And the G8 had a counterterrorism committee, and I was sent to go give a presentation to the counterterrorism committee in Moscow. I'll tell you, it was fascinating for a guy that was never allowed to go there. It was cool. I'd never go back. I mean, I've been there, done that kind of thing. I certainly wouldn't go now under the Putin administration, but it was an interesting trip at the time. I'm glad I got a chance to finally go there. Madman says, what about Russian intelligence and troll farms? I think that's a given. Again, that's not my specialization, and I can't. One thing you'll get from me, guys, I'll never talk about things that I don't know anything about. And I know what troll farms are, and I'm pretty sure most of them are either staffed by or it's a huge function of Russian intelligence. I think that's kind of a given right now. Yes, Putin was an intelligence officer. He was with the KGB in East Germany in the 1980s, I believe, if memory serves me correct. So there's an example of a former intelligence officer becoming president. It doesn't happen a lot. Well, Eisenhower became president. Now he's military. That's different. What's the difference between an intelligence officer and an intelligence analyst, says Abshir? Really, real simple. The intelligence officers collect the information, be it from a human source, for example. They run the investigations, and the analysts take all the information that's collected from human sources, from intercepted, warranted intercepts, from surveillance teams, from allies, and analysts put it together. So my job was an analyst to liaise with the operators and say, what have you find out? What do you don't know? What do you do know? And let's put it together, because my job was to package it for government, for policymakers to understand. Yeah, I was actually ran the operations. I was the guy that sat back and actually took all the information that was being collected and put it up, and put a nice little pretty bow on it and gave it to government clients. So Shaheen asks, how did the intel community get it wrong sometimes? Like the case of the U.S.-Iraq war. First he said Saddam had something to do with 9/11, then he said weapons of mass destruction, and then just, yeah, that's a great question. And I've talked an awful lot about that in the past. It's not the intel agencies get it wrong, although we do make mistakes. It's because the political masters have decided in advance what the intel agencies are going to tell them. So in the case of Saddam, that war was decided well before the intel agencies weighed in. Yes, they relied on an unreliable human source called Curveball. And yes, they had intercept about weapons of mass destruction, but they failed to realize that Saddam's people were lying because if they didn't tell Saddam they had them, Saddam would kill them. And they didn't realize at that time. So it was a combination of poor intelligence and poor decision making. But yeah, I mean, intelligence people they're human, right? They don't get everything right. We're pretty good, but we're not perfect. So Soul Crusher says, so you and Putin are the same skill set? Kind of. Yeah, me and Vlad, we talk regularly about the old days working in the Cold War. Not. So we have some Putin stuff going on here. Did you ever read Tom Clancy's book? I've never, you know what? In all honesty, I have never read an intelligence or spy novel. I've seen movies. I've seen the Bourne movies. I've seen every James Bond movie. I have never read a spy novel. It's not that I don't want to. I haven't gotten around to it, to be perfectly honest. And the problem is there's so many. Like, who do you start with? I mean, yes, there's some better authors and worse authors, but I simply haven't gotten around to it. I see some newcomers here, so welcome to Who's Terrorizing Who Tonight? Who Terrorized Who Tonight, rather. My name is Phil Gurski, president of Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting in Russell, Canada. We're talking about foreign intelligence and whether Canada should have a foreign intelligence service. If it's your first time, welcome. Hope you subscribe to our channel or like us on YouTube. We're here every Monday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern to talk about all things national security. And neither of our play Tom Clancy's games, JB. So, Mark, you got to run, but hey, listen, thanks. I hope we see you again soon, and thanks for your comments and questions. Much appreciated. So, Christian, welcome. Says, what are your views on the rise of the far right in Ukraine, including the Azov Battalion, National Corps, and the right sector? Again, I'm going to be careful. Thanks very much, Christian. If it's your first time, welcome. Got to be careful. I do know about it, but I don't know a lot about it. But my understanding of the situation is that these are basically Russian-supported groups, and they are groups that Putin and his cronies have decided to support in order to back up the fact that he doesn't want to get rid of Crimea, he doesn't want to get rid of Eastern Ukraine, and he's kowtowing to the fact that Eastern Ukraine, and by the way, I am half Ukrainian. My maternal grandparents were from Ukraine, came to Canada during the First World War. That it's largely there's a Russian plurality, I think, in Eastern Ukraine. And that's exactly what is happening in Ukraine, is that Russia is supporting that because Russia wants to stir up shit in Ukraine. Doesn't like Ukrainian independence, doesn't like the fact that Ukraine is cozying up to the West. There was even talk about bringing Ukraine into the West, if you remember, under the Obama administration, I believe it was. And so this is Putin's way of saying, you're not going to do that. It's as simple as that. What else we got here? Is CSIS concerned? Chris says, is CSIS concerned about Canadians who joined the YPG? Why? Oh, this is a great question. I don't know. I do know that people. So for those not familiar, the YPG are essentially the Kurdish that fought ISIS back in between 2014 and 2019, and there were a number of Canadians who actually left the country to join ISIS, and Canadians that went to join the Kurdish forces fighting the Islamic State. I do know they were interviewed when they came back. And give me 1 second. For those not familiar with my second book, Western Foreign Fighters, there's a chapter on that. There's an actual section on Canadians that join the YPG, the Kurds. It's problematic because it is an offense in Canada for a Canadian citizen to join a foreign military operation. That's the way I understand the law. So technically, if you went to go fight, going to fight ISIS was a good thing. I mean, no one's going to say that fighting ISIS is a bad thing. But technically, if you went to go fight against ISIS, you were committing an offense under Canadian law. So a lot of the people that came home were actually, they were stopped at the border and asked. No one was charged, to the best of my knowledge, but it was not encouraged for Canadians to go fight. If you're going to fight ISIS, fight with the Canadian Army. Don't fight with the Kurdish Army. So it was a highly problematic thing. So are we concerned? I don't think we're concerned, but it was a really interesting phenomenon. And I'm not sure exactly where it stands right now. That's a great question, Chris. Not many people know about that. So Shaheen says, what's the most imminent threat to Canada's national security, domestic terrorism, or cyber attacks? All of the above simultaneously. And one thing that really worries me is that, we're living in what I call the post 9/11 period, where it's been all counterterrorism all the time. And as my friends at CSIS used to say, who worked in counterintelligence, hello, what about us? The spies haven't stopped. And they didn't stop. But we were all focused on catching the terrorists. And we took resources away from investigations like counterproliferation, i.e. nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, biological weapons, and counterespionage. So, you want to be doing it all simultaneously, but you've only got so many resources to do so. So you make decisions. You prioritize. You rob from Peter to pay Paul. It's highly problematic, but it's something that you simply have to do. So I think all the threats are there, simultaneously. Okay. Could you produce foreign intelligence for clients? I'm not sure what you mean by that question. I did. I produced foreign intelligence on a daily basis in my years at CSE from 83 to 2000. Thank you, JB. So we've got record numbers on this live stream. Welcome to everybody. This is great. Numbers are growing, guys. I'm loving it. Ariel, you're half Ukrainian as well. Cool. Yeah, cool. Unfortunately, I don't speak a word of Ukrainian. I never learned. My mother's first language is Ukrainian when she grew up in Montreal. She was born in Canada, and all she spoke was Ukrainian to the age of 5. but she didn't teach myself and my brothers, unfortunately. So my Ukrainian is 0. I feel kind of ashamed about that. So is my Polish, by the way. So Madman says, only so much time looking up and reaching intelligence to read a spy novel. I bet you get tired of reading all the information. Yeah, you know what? It does. I'm supposed to be retired, which I ain't. And just keeping up with world news is one thing. I find one thing that unfortunately has really suffered, and I'm trying to deal with this, is I don't read fiction anymore. I haven't read fiction in, I don't know, 20 years, which is bad. I would like to get back into reading fiction and stop reading what's happening in the world all the time. Shaheen, yeah, you see my Iranian flag, yeah. So I dealt with an early, but you probably weren't there, Shaheen, when I talked about this. The flag is actually a gift from a friend of mine. It's, of course, the Shah's flag. And the clock above it is Ayatollah Khomeini. There's a long story as to how I got that clock. I won't go into how I got it, but I'll just report that the clock's never worked since I got it. So I think the clock still reads 6:30 in the year 1400, which says an awful lot about Iran under the Ayatollahs. So Chris says, or Madman says, would a private company be able to create their own intelligence? For what they do, there's something called corporate intelligence. And it's one thing that I seriously thought about doing midway through my career, because corporate intelligence pays a hell of a lot more than government intelligence does. But it wasn't all that well structured here in Canada. So Chris says, can the private sector collect, can you outsource collection to private sector? Kinda. So if let's say you're, I don't know, SNC-Lavalin, big company in Quebec, right? Big into construction projects. If SNC-Lavalin is building something abroad, we had every right and ability to talk to them when they came back from foreign trips and ask what they saw. Now, could we leverage them for collection purposes? I think the answer is no. I'm not sure we did it that way, but that's based on my experience only. Soul Crusher says, which foreign news sources is your go-to? Well, luckily for your Soul Crusher, go to the webpage, borealisthreatandrisk.com. You see all of my bookmarks are there. We've created a file with all of my foreign bookmarks, all 150 newspapers that I read on a daily basis. So I'm not going to cite them all now. They're all sitting there on the website. Abshir says, does CSC investigators... Hang on. God, my glasses are terrible. Does CSC have investigators, or do they only work on computers and signals and leave all human sources to CSIS? Yes, to the best of my knowledge, unless things have changed significantly, CSIS does not have human collectors. That was not part of the mandate. They are a signals intelligence organization, not a human intelligence organization. Yes, the military uses some stuff. So what if they go against the country's interest? Are you talking about corporations here? That would be an interesting question. I don't have an answer to that. I like to think in a country like Canada, there'd be enough of a dialogue going on. Sorry, Matthew, I missed you. Welcome back, Matthew. You're talking about foreign intelligence. So you got here a little bit late. So I think Canada should create a foreign service, but what would the mandate be? Well, we've talked about it for the last 90 minutes, Matthew. My recommendation is simply remove the clause within Canada from the CSIS Act. You've already got a foreign intelligence agency. It already collects foreign intelligence, albeit within Canada. And CSIS already has the mandate in its legislation. And creating a foreign intelligence service from scratch would be prohibitively expensive. Not to mention, take a long time to stand up. And the resources would be significant. So why reinvent the wheel when you don't have to? Christian says, given the delays in Somalia's presidential election, do you think Al-Shabaab has the upper hand to commit political... Do they have... They already have it, Christian. They've been committing political instability for 15 years now. I noticed the story that I just reported this morning. They've threatened Djibouti. They've threatened to carry out attacks in Djibouti because they're welcoming foreign forces. So Al-Shabaab already does this. They don't need the delays in the Somali election to do anything worse. Al-Shabaab has been committing acts of terrorism since 2006 and shows no signs of stopping doing it anytime soon, unfortunately. Glad you agree with me, Matthew. So even private military contractors, if corporations hire hire their own military force. Yeah, you're raising a really good point, and you're going into an area that I'm really not all that well versed in terms of some of these corporations that hire their own security, et cetera, et cetera. I guess hiring own security is not an issue, but hiring your own intelligence gathering abroad, well, it's called corporate intelligence for a reason. It's also called competitive intelligence. Companies do it all the time, right? Coke spied on Pepsi, and Pepsi spied on Coke. Why? Because they had to. They had to figure out what each other was doing, in order to get more market share, or to figure out each other's secrets. So it happens all the time. I'm sure you're from Somalia. Yeah, no, it is sad. It is sad what Somalia has become over the past 3 to 4 decades. I don't disagree with you. It's and it got displaced here to Canada. We had a bunch of Canadians that went to go fight for Al Shabaab in the mid 2000s. I remember watching those files, and we've had Canadians of Somali heritage kill in Somalia. An attack in 2013 killed 20 people at a graduation ceremony. So yeah, it is a very sad situation what's happening in Somalia, and unfortunately does not show any signs of getting any better anytime soon. Emil says, as the Chinese become a global power on par with the United States, do you think they will become a primary target for Islamic extremists? They already are. So despite the fact that the Chinese policy against the Uyghurs in East Turkestan, which they call Xinjiang province, by the way, podcast on my website coming up with a Uyghur Canadian about how he's being targeted here in Canada. You might want to listen to that. There are Uyghur terrorists, and I cover it. 1 second. Again, if you haven't seen my third book, Lesser Jihads, there's a whole chapter on Uyghur terrorism in China. So I'm not making it up. There actually have been terrorist attacks by Uyghurs in China. They've killed dozens of people. So, and we know that groups like Islamic State are constantly saying they're going to hit China more because of what's happening to the Uyghurs in East Turkestan, because of the raising of mosques, because of the incarceration in concentration camps, which the Chinese call vocational centers. So yeah, they already are being targeted for terrorist attacks. There was an attack against Chinese workers in Pakistan late last year by Islamist extremists. So yeah, I mean, China is kicking the snot out of Uyghurs, and therefore Islamist extremists are going to kick the snot out of them. It's a tit for tat kind of thing. Threatened Djibouti. Yeah. Djibouti, not Djibouti. Okay, let's not go down that road. So Slow Crusher says, is Somalia considered a failed state? I think the answer is largely yes. I think they're trying with elections. They're trying with AMISOM, the African Union mission, is trying to bring stability to the country, but it's tough. It's a tough area of the world. There's no question about that. Okay. Would private intelligence sectors be watched by the government sectors if they work against the country's interest? Possibly. We did collect intelligence on foreign corporations. I remember I worked on that for a better part of a decade as CSE, as the Canadian government, because you want to know what larger companies were doing. So yeah, it's entirely possible. Shaheen asks, are CSE and CSIS operations and presence in Canada too much, not enough, or just about right? Is it, what are you, Goldilocks or what? Look, when you work for an intelligence service, you never have enough resources, you never have enough money, you never have enough time. In my time at CSE, we were just not even scratching the surface in terms of our collecting of signals. Just as I said earlier, it was like drinking from a fire hose. We couldn't get to the vast amounts of information. We would throw out raw intelligence on a regular basis. We didn't have time to report it. That was a regular occurrence. CSIS, the same thing. CSIS was, we were well beyond. We just didn't have enough time or resources to do what we did. So it's never enough. It's never enough. But it becomes a money issue. It becomes a resource issue. And do Canadians want a much larger CSE? Do they want a much larger CSIS? CSE is 3 times as large now as when I worked for it in 1983 to 2000. It's got 3,000 now. CSIS is somewhere probably around 3,600. It's never enough to do. There are always more requirements than there are resources. 25, let's get 50. Yeah, that's I'm hoping for more and more viewers all the time. So France still has involvement or interest in Somalia, does it not? France is more interested in Djibouti, which used to be, if memory serves me correct, a French kind of colony. And there were French forces stationed in Djibouti. In fact, may still be there. So France is more. Somalia used to be part of Italy. The Somali colony was part of the Italian Empire at one point until the 1930s, I believe. Don't correct me if I'm wrong on that. Matthew, okay, that's Matthew's question. So Soul Crusher says, what advice would you give a young politician about intelligence in Canada? Listen to your intelligence clients. Listen to the people giving you the intelligence. Don't just tell them to go away. It's not complicated. How diverse is the community? Very diverse. That's one thing I'll say about Canadian intelligence is that Canadian intelligence is as diverse as Canada. We all come from different diasporas. So it's not just English, French. It's not just male, female. I mean, I work with people from all over the world who made Canada their home. And it was great. Absolutely great place to work. They were great people. And it was very, 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 very diverse. Hi, Ty. I'm not sure this is your first time here or time back. How does military intelligence fit? We talked about it already earlier on. So if you just joined us, it has a role. Normally, when you talk about military intelligence, it has to deal with force protection issues when Canada is being posted abroad. It's probably more than that now. I haven't worked alongside D&D for a very long time. I know that when they went into Afghanistan in 2001, they relied on us at CSIS big time to collect intelligence because we had the experience in it. I'm sure they've learned their lessons and are well along the ways of doing it themselves, but I don't know what kind of resources the military devotes to intelligence. I have no idea. I'm sorry on that. So Mark is back for one question. So he came back. Given the unseriousness of our political culture re-intel, are our services at least respected by peers and allies? Were they professionally comparable? There's no question, and I'm biased here, guys. I know we have Americans here in the audience. Canadian intelligence does more than pull its own weight. It was respected internationally for what we did. Absolutely. We didn't do enough of it, and most people thought we didn't devote enough resources or money to it. Absolutely. But pound for pound, kilo for kilo here in Canada, we're pretty damn good. And we got the respect of a lot of people around the world. So, yeah, I was very proud of having worked at the time I did in the Canadian intelligence and the people I worked alongside. Bye, Abshir. I hope we'll see you again on Thursday. Thanks for all your input. It was great. So Chris says, how interested are other foreign intelligence services in Africa? Big piece with huge potential. Yes, from a foreign intelligence perspective, from an economic intelligence perspective, because of the resources, obviously, potential markets when Africa finally gets, its act together. And of course, from a security intelligence perspective, the podcast was last Thursday. We talked about the rise of jihadist terrorism in Africa. Africa is now supplanting the Middle East as perhaps the number one area of Islamist terrorism. So there's a lot of resources being tuned into Africa for all the good reasons that there's a lot of intelligence to be gathered there. So Mike says, hello, Mike. Not long ago, you did an article about degree requirements for different agencies. Have you received any further feedback about that changing? No, I have not. To the best of my knowledge, you're still required to have a university degree, undergraduate, not a master's, not a PhD, a university degree. I don't know that that's changed much. In the old days, all you did was a high school degree, diploma. Now it's a university degree. And the degree itself doesn't really matter. As long as it's not basket weaving or snorkeling, you're probably okay. My degree was in Spanish. I had a master's in Spanish of all things in 1983. And look where I ended up. So it's not impossible. Madman said, I think the corporate sector could overwhelm the government intelligence sector when push comes to shove. But due to the fact that they have more funding and are not burdened by the government, I think you're right. I mean, they play by different rules, right? Governments are constrained by all kinds of things, budgets, policies, legislation, which I know companies are. So I think you're right. Yes, thank you, Matthew. Ethiopia as well was governed by the Italians for quite some time. Would make one hell of a spy novel. That's true. Okay, you're going now for sure, Mark. Okay, we'll see you hopefully on Thursday or another time. Thanks for stopping by. Christian says, in Mozambique's Cabo Delgado region, Mozambique's Cabo Delgado region prone to more Islamic extremist attacks in the near future. Also, are sanction regimes on Islamic extremist groups the solution to limit terrorist financing? Great question, Christian. I've been talking about Mozambique now for years. I had a woman on my podcast 6 months ago, JB. Her name was Jasmine Opperman, talking about Mozambique. She's one of the world authorities in Mozambique. Mozambique is in deep doo-doo when it comes to Islamist extremism. I don't know if you've been reading the news the past 24, 48 hours. They took over a whole town and are massacring people. So yeah, Mozambique is in deep trouble, and a lot of Western powers are looking there now what they can do. So that's not going to be good anytime soon. And sanctions regarding terrorist financing. I don't know a lot about terrorist finance. I never worked in terrorist financing. To me, most attacks didn't require financing, at least not here in Canada. So it wasn't a big part of what I looked at. But I do know other people that are worried about terrorist financing. But I'm going to kick that can down the road if you don't mind, Christian, because it's, as I said, I hate talking about things of which I know nothing, and terrorist financing is one of those things, unfortunately. Felix is psychology background, useful intelligence. Sure. Why not? You can figure out, it helps you figure out how people think and why they think. As an investigator, as an intelligence officer, trying to figure out someone's motivation is the key to getting that person to cooperate. That's what an IO does, meets with you and says, hey, what would it take for you to tell us what we need to know? What would it take for you to agree to do things for us for which you'll get paid? It's all about motivation. It's all about psychology. It's all about understanding people. So yeah, a degree in psychology is absolutely useful. I don't have any background in psychology myself, but I think it would be a great way to look at as a possible career in intelligence. Absolutely. If you're just joining us, this is Who Terrorised Who Tonight. My name is Phil Gurski, Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting in Russell, Canada. We're talking about foreign intelligence here in Canada and all other types of matters, which is great. What I've noticed about this live stream, I'm still getting used to, is that the topics just keep growing and growing and growing. So thank you to all of you who've been there. If it's your first time, well, I'd like to see you come back and subscribe to the channel. Like us on Facebook. We're getting more and more hits all the time. So thanks to everyone for expressing the interest in this stuff. It's fascinating stuff. And we're here Mondays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. You also should check the website, borealisthreatandrisk.com. It's where all the blogs go, all the podcasts go, et cetera, et cetera. So Shaheen says, what's just harder to get into, civilian intel or military intel? I don't think there's a difference. The military hires civilians and assigns military personnel to do intelligence, and civilian agencies, by definition, hire civilians. I don't think there's a difference. I don't think that, I don't know as much about military intelligence, never having worked for them. I was completely a civilian, but I don't think it is different, to be perfectly honest. It's your first time, Shaheen. This is great. I'm glad you're loving it, and I hope you're going to be a regular supporter of us and subscriber. That would be wonderful. We're glad that you're here as well. So Matthew says, I hear that France is sending additional troops to Mozambique. I heard that too, and I'm thinking, wow, France is already up to its eyeballs in the Sahel with what they call Operation Barkhane, which is an effort to help Chad and Niger and Mali deal with both Al-Qaeda and Islamic State affiliated terrorists in that part of the continent. Now they're going to send troops to Mozambique as well. Boy, if that's not stretching things, overstretching things, France might want to think twice about this. They're already mired in the Sahel. A lot of criticism about French airstrikes killing civilians in the Sahel, and I mean they're not normally found in southeastern Africa. That was a Portuguese colony, Mozambique. So what the French are doing there, I don't know. It's chancy at best. Hey Ty, first time there as well. So Canadian intel stuff being talked about. Well, I hope you come back, because this live stream is all about Canadian intel. Well, not only about Canadian intel, but it's about intel through a Canadian lens, because that's me, right? With my Team Canada jersey and my Team Canada hat, doesn't get much more Canadian than this. If you cut my hand, it bleeds Canadian red. Last time I checked. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do a live stream. That sounds like more like a porn video or some kind of a slasher video. But I'm glad you're here, and I hope to see you back. Calvin, this might be your first time as well. Last time I checked, the military in intel ops was not direct entry. Usually requires a few years another trade before transferring. I didn't know that. That's interesting. So thank you for that, Calvin. I wasn't aware those were requirements. Matthew says, moreover, do you think that similar to Germany, that Canada should disperse the intelligence community to the provincial governments? Wow. So what Matthew's referring to, this is a very German thing, and there's a reason for this. So the Germany has a structure that's both federal and state governed. So for example, the German intelligence service is called the BFV, German for intelligence service. My German isn't what it used to be. That's the national service. They also have a national kind of an RCMP kind of thing called the BKA, which is I know this is the Bundeskriminalamt, which is the National Criminal Service. There are 16 German states, 19 German states. Anyhow, there's a bunch of German states. Every German state has its own intelligence service and its own criminal service. So in addition to the BFV, there's the LFV. The L stands for Land, which is German for state. So you have the BFV and you have 16 or 19 LFVs. You have the BKA and you have 16. Is it 19? Thanks, Matthew. You have 19 LKAs. And the reason for that, which is it's described to me, the reason for that, this was after World War II. And there was fear that they didn't want to recreate a system where the Nazis could come back to power and concentrate power in Berlin. So the states got an incredible amount of independence. I'm not a German historian, so I might get part of this wrong. This is the way it was explained to me by the Germans when I was in Berlin talking to them, that they felt they wanted to have independent state services so that there wasn't too much power concentrated in the capital. Now, each state service, not all the same. So the larger states have larger services, and there's a lot of coordination by the federal service in Berlin. But the Germans have a fascinating way of doing that. So your question, Matthew, sorry for that long explanation. Should Canada do something similar? Absolutely not. It's hard enough running one intelligence service, let alone 13 intelligence services. You count the provinces, the territories. In fact, CSIS does operate right across Canada in what are called our regions. Every province in Canada, with the exception of Prince Edward Island, has an office, and the territories don't either. They're covered from various other provinces. So the regions work very closely with headquarters. The system works as well as it can. It would be a disaster to create an Alberta intelligence service or a Saskatchewan intelligence service. That would be an absolutely stupid move, which I think is never going to happen. So she says, I've talked to some people. Sorry. My eyes are getting tired as the night goes on. It's a trade of itself. It's just that there are a few positions available. So if one wants to get in, he or she might have to wait more than a year, maybe even 2. I think this is the military you're talking about. Yeah. So, for example, the 2 intelligence company in Toronto is not accepting any officer applications. Yeah. Madman says, what are my 2 cents on Project Paperclip? Well, if I knew what Project Paperclip was, I might have an opinion. But as I have no idea what Project Paperclip is, I'm going to remain silent. So fill me in, Madman, on what Project Paperclip is. So, but are these companies penalized for working with Nazis? Yeah, I don't have any information on that whatsoever. I apologize for that. Don't have all the answers here tonight. I got some answers. I don't have all the answers. If you're just joining us, we're coming up to the second hour of Who Terrorised Who Tonight. My name is Phil Gurski, former CSIS and CSE analyst with the Canadian government, author of books on terrorism. If it's your first time, welcome. We'd like to see you guys come back by subscribing to this channel. We go live stream on Mondays and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Also go to the webpage, borealisthreatandrisk.com, where you'll find all this information, all the blogs and podcasts free of charge. A link to my new book, which you might want to consider getting if terrorism is your bag. If you're interested in terrorism, not that you're a terrorist. The Peaceable Kingdom, History of Terrorism in Canada from Confederation to the Present, available only on my website. It's a history of terrorism as seen through the eyes of CSIS and the RCMP. It's not an academic book. I talked to all my best friends about working in counterterrorism in Canada, so it's very much an insider's view into terrorism in Canada. What else we got here tonight? Wow. What are the 5 core competencies that every intelligence officer needs to have? I didn't think there were 5. Are there 5? That's the first time I've ever heard it expressed in that way. I have no idea. I had to think about that one. Good night, Ms. Walsh. It's nice to see you. So according to Wikipedia, the source of all intelligence, says JB, Operation Paperclip was a secret intelligence program in which there were more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, technicians, such as Werner von Braune and his V2 rocket team, taken from Germany to the United States for U.S. government employment, primarily between 45 and 59. I think that we obviously in the aftermath of the war, as I said, the Cold War started in Ottawa when Guzenko defected from the Soviet embassy. We realized the Soviets weren't our friends, so we needed all the help we could get in terms of our nuclear weapons development because the Soviets had them as well. So if we're going to use German scientists that were helping Hitler and the Nazis program, why not? They had the knowledge. They had the incentive of getting the hell out of Germany, which was a disaster economically after the war. So if they come to America and help with the American weapons program, why not? I don't got a problem with that. I think it's fantastic. See you, Shaheen. Thanks for all your questions and comments. It's great. We'll see you on Thursday. Thanks, Matthew, for the feedback. I appreciate it. Well, folks, we are rapidly approaching the 2-hour mark. I think we've put to bed the Canadian foreign intelligence question. I'm hoping, but yeah, guys, I don't want to belabor this point more than I have in the past, but I just wish that people who weighed in on this issue about, Canada's Foreign Intelligence Service or Canada's Security Intelligence Mandate, they actually had some experience in the business as opposed to thinking about it or writing about it. I mean, isn't there a minimum requirement here? I mean, yeah, anybody has the right to comment on anything. Okay? This is a free country. But shouldn't we hold people to some kind of a standard that if they're going to try to speak intelligently, no pun intended on intelligence, they have some experience in intelligence? I don't know, guys. Maybe I'm biased in that regard. See you, Realpolitik. We'll see you on Thursday. Thanks for your input, and we'll see you in 72 hours. Anybody want to weigh in on something else tonight before we sign off? Yeah, I agree, Matthew. I mean, I don't know. Again, I'm biased. I spent 3 decades in this career, and I get a little miffed when people who couldn't spell intelligence are trying to tell intelligence agencies what to do and how to do it. I mean, like I said, I don't hire my plumber to do brain surgery. Why you would hire somebody who never worked in intelligence to comment on intelligence doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But anyhow, it is what it is. Anything else tonight, folks? This has been a great discussion on an awful lot of issues. Well, yeah, your point is, JB. I mean, they can influence people, and my fear is that the people taking the advice may not realize that these people don't actually have any experience in this regard, and so you've got politicians and policymakers making serious decisions based on not the best information at hand. That's what worries me. I don't know how you stop it, but anyhow. Yusuf says, I got a YouTube notification regarding new terminology CSIS has come out with. Really interesting. Okay, I know where you're going with this, Yusuf, and I hate it. You're talking about ideologically motivated violent extremism. I hate the term. It's a mealy-mouthed term that should have been banned when it came out. We're being too Canadian on this one, and the Aussies are doing the same thing. They're talking about, calling all things IMVE. I hate it. I hate the term. You call it what it is. If it's Islamist, you call it Islamist. If it's Jewish, you call it Jewish. If it's Buddhist, you call it Buddhist. If it's far right, you call it far right. You don't call it IMVE. That's such a Canadian solution. And if I was still at CSIS now, I'd be ranting and raving about it. I sure as hell wouldn't be using this terminology. I'd probably get fired. I mean, no, they don't fire anybody. But anyhow, this is for those not following us, this is this big debate about changing terminology, because the term Islamist terrorism is seen as too harsh. It makes people feel bad. Yeah, well, no shit, Sherlock. So does terrorism make people feel bad. So you can't call something what it is. You're wasting everyone's time, as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, I'm going on a tangent here. Are there countries, asked Chris, that punch above their weight? The Vatican or Singapore? It's a great question, and I think I may have mentioned in an earlier podcast, earlier live stream rather, that I used to get some of the best information from very small services like the Norwegians and the Danes and the Dutch on Islamist terrorism, which you wouldn't have expected, but they are really, really good. So yes, I think some do punch above their weight. IMVE, Madman, is ideologically motivated violent extremism. And the terminology we've been using since day one is Islamist extremism, far-right extremism, far-left extremism, Hindu extremism in the case of India. And people say we don't call it that anymore. We just call it IMVE. It's a stupid term, and it's basically it's a mealy mouth thing that really sucks. As far as I'm concerned, I don't like this. I don't like this movement at all. I don't like it at all. I think it's wrong. Anyhow, then again, there's people that say that incels are the greatest threat to society. Apparently now these are involuntary celibates, like Alec Manassian was not, because he lied about being an incel. So you see all the time that CSIS should drop everything. CSIS should stop looking at jihadis and start looking at incels. Yeah, whatever. I don't work at CSIS anymore sometimes. We just passed the 2-hour mark, folks. It does paint a broad brush. That's exactly that's the whole point. You want to be as specific as possible. You can't do your job if you're not specific. If you paint far too broad a brush, you're not doing your job properly. Because each form of extremism has its own characteristics. And calling it all IMVE is that you're right, Yusuf. It's all about stigmatization. I get that. And I remember lots of pressure, lots of criticism when I used to talk in the 2000s to people about Islamist terrorism. Oh, you don't call it that. You're offending us. Well, the terrorists are offending you as well. And the terrorists are offending me by using your faith to justify their acts of violence. So don't blame me. Blame the terrorists. So, yeah, you're right, Madman. I mean, if you used IMVE, I mean, which one are you talking about? Is it Buddhist in Myanmar? Is it Jews in the West Bank? So it is coded language. And it's typical Canadian. We don't want to offend anybody. Remember, it's like the guy in the bus, right? Stepping on people's toes. We're the ones saying sorry all the time. I'm just getting a little bit tired, but I'm retired. So, Iceberg, welcome back. Can you imagine, kids of the future learning about this term? Well, and then they're the ones that have to deal with it, right? If you can't call something what it is, you can't deal with it. This isn't you learned this in kindergarten. This isn't rocket science. Anyhow, I'm not going to win this argument. I've already lost this argument in the public domain. But as far as when I write my articles and do my interviews, I call it exactly what it is. I call it Islamist terrorism. I call it Jewish terrorism. I call it Buddhist terrorism. And if you don't want to talk to me anymore, then don't talk to me anymore. That's completely your choice. But I'm not going to change how I view things and the accuracy of labeling things properly in order to get on the radio or get on TV. So it ain't going to happen. No, Emil, I don't think these terms have the advantage of obfuscating what the Service of Canadians Intel Agencies are monitoring. No, I don't think so. Because we know what we're monitoring. This is a political correct term. This is a woke culture term. I can actually use that term. This is exactly what it is. Centurion says, I have a code name for terrorist, Terrigens. Is that a bad thing to do? You never know. Try it. Float it out there. I taught linguistics for 15 years at university while I was working at CSE and CSIS, and you never can predict which words are going to catch on. So put it out there and see who salutes. You never know. It could be great. I'll have to find out. Anybody else, guys? Anything else you want to raise tonight on our live stream? It's been a great conversation so far. Well, yeah, that's exactly the point, Madman, is you don't know what we're talking about. You've got to, you got to be as informative as you possibly can for your public without betraying secrets. And if you just talk about IMV this and IMV that, well, what the hell does that even mean? It's just wrong. And it's just wrong. It's as simple as that. It's a dumb idea, which seems to have captured the imagination of the current government. I mean, if we have a new government in the next election, who knows? They're going to throw the term out. I have no idea. I think I'm running out of steam. 2 hours later. Thank you, Yusuf. It was great. I'm glad that you tuned in from the beginning, and I hope that you're going to be here with us on Thursday as well. I shouldn't say this, but if you aren't able to join us live, it does go up on the website eventually. I'd love to have you guys live because you can interact and ask questions and make comments and have exchanges amongst you. It's a lot of fun. I appreciate you all being here tonight with your points, with your arguments, with your questions, with your banter. This has been great. This is now I got to figure out what to talk about on Thursday. Don't worry, I'll come up with something for Thursday. But this has been a fascinating conversation on foreign intelligence. I hope you learned something about foreign intelligence here in Canada, the difficulty in creating a foreign intelligence service from scratch. You just don't do it overnight. It takes a lot of time. And there are easier solutions to do this. If the decision is made to have a foreign intelligence service, which has not been decided, thanks, Chris. It's complicated, but it doesn't have to be as complicated as people say it is. So these podcasts live forever. I thought they went into a burn bag. I'm guessing, Emil, that you know what a burn bag is, and I'm guessing most people don't. But yeah, I remember burn bags. I remember the guy who used to burn the bags. It was a guy called Ivan. That was his job, to collect all the burn bags at night. Now I'm really showing my age. This is great, guys. I really have enjoyed the conversation tonight. I think we're going to call it a night. So thank you very, very much to everyone again for coming out. Hope to see you again on Thursday. I'll put in either tomorrow or Wednesday the topic for this Thursday. But I really do appreciate you all being here and being as active participants as you are. I'm really starting to like this live streaming option, which I've just started doing for not all that long now. Thanks, Emil. Thanks, Iceberg. Hope to see you guys on Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your short evenings, unless you're on the West Coast where your evenings are just starting, I suppose. My evening is coming to an end, I hope, at some point. But sincerely, guys, I do appreciate you being here. It's a lot of fun, and we'll have an equal amount of fun. So Habs versus Oilers tomorrow, says Yusuf. Yeah, I haven't seen an NHL game yet this year. I don't think I'm going to watch one. I used to have Sens tickets, but then again, I used to do a lot of things before COVID. So, okay, guys, I'm going to call it an evening. Thanks again to all. Good night, and we'll see you guys on Thursday. Sleep well, or if you're on the West Coast, go. I guess you can't go out and party well because it's COVID, but do something well. And we'll see you in 72 hours. Thanks again, guys.